There is a 19-member military drill that's taking place in the Pacific around Australia and PNG. What could be the implications of it? The Australians are saying that the Chinese will watch it very clearly. All this even while the Australian Prime Minister is in China on a 6-day visit. What does it mean? What implications could it have? India is also part of the military exercise. To decode that, to understand that, I'm joined on the show by two special guests. Lieutenant General retired Sanjay Kulkarni. He's a former Director General of Infantry, and Shubhajit Roy. He's the diplomatic editor of the Indian Express. Thank you for both gentlemen for being on the show. First to you, General, what should we make of this military exercise? Why are these 19 countries gathering there and conducting this military exercise? What is the purpose?
Thank you, Amrit. First and foremost, these exercises are held every alternate year. And this is the 11th of this. And 19 nations, as you rightly said, India is part of it, along with Japan, Australia, United States, you have Britain, France, all of these countries. Primarily, it is to check China in the Indo-Pacific. There is no denying the fact that the Chinese might just be thinking at this point of time that, well, everybody seems engaged everywhere. America is also engaged, so are the Russians, and so are the Israelis. Everyone engaged, and therefore this just could be an opportune time. That is what they might be thinking. Well, the Taiwanese have also immobilized themselves without fail, and the kind of 11 aircraft over there, the number of vessels over there, the ships over there, crossing the ADIZ, that the Air Defense Identification Zone is concerned, that the median line is crossed. About 8 or 9 of the Chinese aircraft have crossed that median line. But notwithstanding that, the Chinese are also all the time pressurizing the Taiwanese, to toe the line of China. We are part of China, that's what it is. Well, Lee, the president of Taiwan, says irrespective of the parties in Taiwan, they stand for their sovereignty. They wouldn't get bullied by the Chinese. But the Chinese, as they have always been wanting it, probably the Chinese still feel that the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without a fight. So fire nothing, pressurize, a lot of what he calls, Lee calls it influence warfare, propaganda, pressurize, and all of it. Then, of course, a conflict, and then Americans are obviously equally worried, though, as most of them have been feeling that the Americans haven't given a blank check that they would support and protect Taiwan. So that is also there. But the HIMARS having got positioned by the Americans in Taiwan, and there's, these particular artillery weapons which have a range of almost 480 kilometers, and the strait itself, as we know, is just about 180 kilometers by 130. Taiwan is about 160 kilometers at its base. Even if you take the distance between Taiwan, the island, and the Chinese mainland. So keeping all this in view, I think the Taiwan is prepared for it, but the Chinese have always insisted that Taiwan is part of China, and also that the South China Sea, 3.6 million square kilometers, when the Chinese intend wanting 90% of the South China Sea. So the Chinese have, in their own mind, been wanting to claim the South China Sea, not allowing maybe the Spratly Islands, the Paracel Islands, the Scarborough.
Okay.
There's a lot which is happening there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shubhajit, General Kulkarni argues that yes, the Chinese, would be watching very closely, and because of their concerns in the South China Sea, which they regard as their backyard. But this is South Pacific; it's very far. Why should the Chinese be concerned?
Well, China sees, the entire Indo-Pacific region as its backyard, as its sphere of influence. And in the last decade or so, especially under President Xi Jinping, we have seen, sort of assertion of its, sovereignty, assertion of its military and political power in this region. So even if it's, as you argued, it's South Pacific, but China feels that and views this region as part of its backyard. So there is a sense of concern from China, but so all the Quad partners, India, Australia, Japan, and the US, they view these sort of statements and this positioning by China as sort of much more aggressive and assertive in its behavior.
Okay. But Shubhajit, isn't it natural or normal on part of China to be concerned if somebody comes and docks when the Chinese dock a ship in Sri Lanka? Don't we get concerned? So isn't it natural for the Chinese to be concerned that what are these 19 nations as far as from the United Kingdom and Canada and France and of course the Quad members, the Quad partners are a part of this exercise?
Well, as you know that the seas and the law of the seas dictate that none of these oceans or seas are sovereign territory of one country, because international trade moves through the waters of these Pacific Ocean or the Indian Ocean. So there is a sort of a logic behind freedom of navigation, which is enshrined in the United Nations Charter as well as the UN laws. So I think from that perspective, every country which relies on international trade, which crosses the Pacific or crosses the Indian Ocean, has a stake in this freedom of navigation and overflight. So from that perspective, countries even far away have a stake in the peace and stability, and therefore the China sort of cannot object to in the movement
Okay.
or in the military exercises conducted by countries of that region.
Okay, let me get this to General Kulkarni. But General Kulkarni, Shobhajit argues that, because of freedom of navigation, so all these who are conducting this exercise are really stakeholders in it. So if they're conducting an exercise, there's no problem with it. The only problem is it's a military exercise. So the Chinese, it wouldn't be, one shouldn't be surprised if the Chinese look at this as the others led by the US ganging up on them.
The Chinese are also bullying everyone in the South China Sea. The Chinese have also been firing across the Yonaguni Islands, which are just about 100 kilometers from Okinawa to Taiwan. So the North Koreans have been firing missiles over the Japanese main island. So all this, not that they aren't threatening the island nations. We've seen since 1974 how they have killed the sailors, the Vietnamese sailors, how they've done that again in 1988, about 60 odd Vietnamese sailors then, how they've been using laser guns to blind the Philippine ships over there. Because all this area firstly has a huge amount of shipping. That is the South China Sea that I'm talking about. Huge fishing, 50% of the world shipping. Also, of course, like rightly brought out, it's the freedom of navigation. Almost about 21% of the world's trade, $5 trillion of trade passes through this. But in the East China Sea, the South China Sea. Now, Japan per se, of course, the Chinese wouldn't want. But then the Japanese also have a base in Okinawa, where the US is based in Japan. But that Okinawa is about 500 kilometers, and this Yonaguni Island is just about 100 kilometers. All island is 1,700 inhabitants. But notwithstanding all that, it takes time. Unless there's a quick response and effective deterrence against the Chinese, Taiwanese would always be feeling threatened by such an overwhelming, huge nation like China. And at point of time, when Xi Jinping himself, is not very confident in what's going on in China. So that is also one of the reasons that the Chinese would want to show their assertiveness over Taiwan, that this is the time. Xi Jinping also might be feeling to gain back his popularity in China, do it with the, when the iron is on, when everyone else is occupied elsewhere. But then Americans, the Japanese, Australians, everybody feels very strongly that the Chinese can't have their way. Now, China till 47 has been different, and again after that, Vietnamese placed these islands, partly in Prasar Islands in 17th century belong to them. It isn't like that. So there is a lot that the Chinese, probably the more richer they get, the more economically prosperous they get, the more militarily strong they get, they intend bullying the countries along. They don't trust ASEAN. They don't want to go along with ASEAN. They want to treat every country bilaterally so that together they sit across the table and then bully. Bully because they have strength, they have money power, they have military power, and they do what they want to do in South China Sea. So there is a lot that is happening, and Taiwanese are bound to feel it. How often do the Chinese cross the median line? As often as they wish to, and keep crossing the area as they. So
Okay.
that's not the way the Chinese must also do. So the democracy of Taiwan is being protected by all other freedom-loving nations, insisting on the freedom of navigation, and China insists on expansionism, domination, bullying. Well, nobody will accept that from China.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shubhajit, you cover these affairs on the foreign affairs. You look at this region closely. Do the Chinese really bully? I mean, on Taiwan, they actually look at it as part of their territory. That's a dispute, which if they're increasing their sphere of influence in the East China Sea or have a problem with the Japanese on some islands, they look at them as part of their country. If they are increasing their sphere of influence, the pearl of strings, etc., but which country doesn't do that? Aren't the Americans doing that? Which country doesn't do that? So do they really bully, and is there unilateralism as the American camp says?
Well, you have to only see India's border with China, how it has played out in the last 5 years since 2020 to understand whether they bully or not.
No, but you have a border dispute with them, na? Shubhajit, you have a border dispute with them.
Yeah. So India has a border dispute, and so does, say, Japan. So they do face the heat for, having a border with China. So in that sense, China has, as it has grown in its economic power and military power, it has in the last 10, 15 years started asserting itself much more proactively than it had done in the past. And this we have seen not just in the India-China border, but also in the Indo-Pacific. So I think what we have seen, these instances have increased in the last decade or so, and that is what concerns everyone around the world. That the second biggest economy and military power in the world is asserting itself, flexing its muscles, and trying to intimidate its neighbors in the last 10, 15 years. So, and that has become much more pronounced. And that's why I think there's been a reason for concern from the world, including India, US, Australia, and Japan.
Okay. So, all right. So, General, if to understand from you, how do the Indians look at it? The Indians are a part of the military exercise, but say on Taiwan, we maintain a one China policy. We do not have a full-fledged mission of ours there. We have some kind of a representative office for trade and culture, etc. So how do the Indians look at it? We have a feud with them when it comes to resolving the border issue, but beyond that, how do we step?
See, when you look at Tibet, for instance, now that's one place we always been insisting that right from 1912 onwards, that Tibet has been virtually independent and a sovereign. They have been having their own passport, own currency, and we have the 1914 agreement, all of it on the McMahon line, all of it that goes along. Taiwan also, around the same time, together, both the PRC and the ROC had been together wanting to get rid of the dynasty over there and what they call it as 100 years of humiliation. After that, of course, the breakup took place and you found the PRC in the mainland and the ROC moved to Taiwan. So they are the same lot. It isn't that they're different lot, but just that because the People's Republic of China seems to think that the Republic of China is also there. It isn't so. Chiang Kai-shek moved there. So there is a lot, but we have been very, very close to Taiwan all along. The ROC is even before the Second World War, continuously all along, and with Chiang Kai-shek, Pandit Nehru had a fantastic relation. So we had a very good thing, except that both of them fought the revolution together, but the PRC decided to win and remain land, and then the PRC wanted the ROC as part of them. So that is their internal problem, the concern. Taiwan is a prosperous country. Taiwan is a huge chip manufacturing country. It's a huge, I would say, influence in technology that it
Yeah,
has.
all
And
that is there, General. My question was that, when the tensions rise, we generally tend to stay silent and out of it, saying it's an internal affair of theirs. They should resolve it. At max, our position would be ambivalent, saying that, oh, it should not be very aggressive. The aggressive maneuvers shouldn't be there. But we don't say all that. But actually, we've got concerns with an expanding China, because that
yeah,
somewhere
but,
steps on our sphere of influence.
no, definitely. We have no doubt we have concerns because China has not been adhering to any of the treaties that they signed. And so China has not been able to walk the talk at all. See what they have done in Taiwan, despite all the border agreements that we've had. And therefore, much that to have good relations with China, we do accept one China policy. There is no denying the fact. We do accept Tibet being part of China, no doubt about that. But that does not mean China starts taking it for granted and starts doing what it wants to do. It is with a view to have good relations. And in that context, China cannot afford to think that no, we will continue to do what we want, and we are the center of the universe. We are the ones who matter. Let all of you sit down on the floor.
Okay.
I am the only one who will be sitting on the table.
All right.
That's not acceptable. Yeah.
Okay. My producer tells me that I'm totally out of time, but I'll before I let go of you both, Shubhajit, I want to ask you, how do we see the Australians, while the Australians are holding this exercise because it's happening on their territory, in their in their waters. The Australian Prime Minister is in China for a 6-day visit, and there he goes and says, well, we would prefer the status quo, essentially saying that we don't agree with the Chinese that they should dominate Taiwan, or Taiwan is a part of their territory.
Yeah, as Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese is in China, and he is trying to mend the relationship with China that had really gone south under the Conservatives in the government the last decade or so. And ever since he came to power, that has been sort of his effort, while not compromising on the sort of the assertive and the expansionist behavior that the Australians view the Chinese conducting in their sort of periphery. So he's trying to strike that balance, and the Chinese are also viewing this as a sort of a progressive improvement of the relationship. And that is how you have to frame this particular visit by Anthony Albanese, who is, I think this is his first visit after he was re-elected. And so Australia and China is really trying to build...
But Shubhajit, how is he mending the relationship, or trying to mend the relationship, if he lands in China and says this on their soil, that, well, we believe that, no, Taiwan is not a part of you. If somebody were to land up here on our soil and say something on Kashmir, wouldn't that raise our hackles?
Yeah, it would. But I think that is the balancing act that Prime Minister Albanese is trying to make, that to focus on the economic side of the relationship, which is very important for Australia, because as you would remember, China had imposed a lot of trade barriers, non-tariff barriers, and had really strong-armed with the Australians in the last 5 years or so, 5 to 7 years or so. And Albanese is trying to mend that relationship and take a much more pragmatic step when it comes to economic relationship, but maintain a strong posture politically. So I think he's trying to
strike a balance and see that he can have a trade relationship, and as you say, but he does have a problem with their expansionist attitude towards, generally in the region and otherwise. I'll have to close it here. Thank you both gentlemen, General Sanjay Kulkarni, Shubhajit Roy, for being on the show and lending us your insights. Thank you.